Hey, I'm Jai, and I've been using a Light Phone 2 as my primary cell phone for over 4 years now, and I recently pre-ordered the Model 3. I say all of that to clarify two things up front. One, this is not a hands-on review of the Light Phone 3. At the time I'm recording this, it was announced 1 month ago, and it's still 6 months away from release. And two, I'm not just a Light Phone hater. I'm very much a part of the target demographic for these devices, and I want them to succeed. I'm making this video because despite being a satisfied customer, I can't help but admit that the Model 3 is a bizarre product without a clear value proposition. Not because of the going light philosophy or the company's mission statement. I'm fully aligned with that, and I assume you are too if you're considering buying one. But it's bizarre for reasons I'm going to dive into in a bit. But first, let's do a quick rundown of what's changing between models 2 and 3 for those who don't know. As you'd expect, all the connectivity has been improved. USB is now Type-C, Bluetooth is 5.0, data is 5G, Wi-Fi I assume will be Wi-Fi 6 or better. It's a bit more waterproof, a bit more dust-proof, and it now has an aluminum frame. Battery capacity is doubled, and storage is up to 128 gigs from 8 gigs. The big additions are a rear-facing camera with a dedicated shutter button, a flashlight which can be activated via a new click wheel button, a fingerprint reader, and a loudspeaker. They've also added NFC and a front-facing camera that they say they don't have plans for them on launch, but they've teased future support for a digital wallet and video calling. No formal timeline on those just yet. I also have to praise their improvements to repairability. The battery is easily removable. No word yet on replaceability of the other components, but for what it's worth, they announced a screen repair program for the Model 2 back in November 2023, so it's clearly something they're working towards improving. I will get to the screen in a bit, but for subtractions, there's really only one. They removed the headphone jack, which is not unusual nowadays, but it is disappointing. I still drive an older car with an aux cable, so I will personally need to find some kind of workaround. On a similar note, while it's not technically a subtraction from the Model 2, I'm disappointed by the lack of a micro SD slot. Once the music app became available for the Model 2, it became very easy to run up against the storage limit. It seems like they learned that they needed to increase the storage, but they didn't learn to future-proof themselves by offering expandable storage for whatever reason. Okay, let's talk about the screen. The Model 2 has a 2.8-inch e-ink display. The Model 3 has a 3.9-inch AMOLED display. The glass over top of it is matte, and the interface is still black and white everywhere it's shown. But given the economics of making a custom black and white AMOLED display, I assume it's capable of displaying color. But they don't explicitly mention this as a selling point. They don't say color screen anywhere. None of the photos show it displaying color, which is odd and worth remembering. But by just about all objective metrics, this would be an improvement. And in some practical ways, it certainly is. Their design manifesto frames the change of the screen as an improvement to texting. The additional width of the screen is framed the same way as well. And as an everyday user of the Model 2, texting has kind of sucked. Every time you initiate the keyboard, you have to rotate the phone, which gives you just barely enough room to type. But leaves only enough room above the keyboard to see the last 6 to 8 words you typed, and you don't get to see any of the words you're responding to. This new screen allows you to type in portrait mode, and I'm hoping it'll leave enough room at the top to keep the conversation history on screen. The bigger problem with the Model 2, though, was the typing speed. You cannot type fast on this. It will not keep up. It will drop your inputs. And even after becoming accustomed to the speed limit, I was still double checking my messages every time for typos. I do expect a better user experience on the Model 3, and that's a big reason why I pre-ordered it. And while its screen isn't strictly necessary for a camera, there are digital cameras out there that have that are screenless. It's definitely nice to have. It'll be even nicer to see the photos that other people are sending to me. With the Model 2, any photos that are sent to me are redirected to my email to be viewed on another device later on. I've personally been satisfied with this workaround, but it's obviously better to just see them on screen immediately if possible. And I'm assuming that the Model 3 offers this. Again, none of their photos demonstrate this, which is odd and worth remembering. Because with an AMOLED screen, they no longer have the built-in excuse for not supporting it. And that is kind of the frustration and what this video is all about. With the Model 2's screen, it's objectively less capable than the Model 3 screen. And they knew that when they put it in the phone. This was not the best technology available when they put it on here. I think they planned a device with a very small list of functions, and they paired it with a screen that could just barely satisfy those functions. And it wasn't capable of much more. In fact, it wasn't even capable of some of the creature comforts of those functions, but overall it was very evenly balanced. With the Model 3, those creature comforts have been satisfied by pairing the device with a much, much, much more capable screen. And I don't want to downplay the addition of the camera. It was the biggest sacrifice I had to make when switching to the light phone. And if you're doing the balancing act again, having a decent camera with a decent screen, it makes sense. That is balanced. But it's just that for the rest of the functions outside of the camera, now that it has the screen, why can't it do more? With the Light Phone 2, I never asked for a chess app or a banking app or a Wikipedia app because I knew it would be impossible to have a decent experience on an e-ink screen that I chose to buy. I also never asked for an email client or a news reader or social media or a browser because, again, I chose to buy from a brand that warns against having those apps in your pocket. It was clear they were never going to offer that. My frustration with light phones lies in the sizable pool of unsupported apps that are neither unhealthy nor visually complex. A weather app, for example. All the photos on their site are people outside, which is consistent with their philosophy of getting offline and stop doom scrolling and go touch grass, right? And yet the phone can't tell me if it's going to rain. Other examples would be like a weight tracking app, a white noise generator for bedtime, a song recognition app, a two-factor authentication app. The reason I haven't had those apps on my Light Phone 2 is because the company has to develop individual bespoke apps for such a small, slow, monochromatic screen. And if they're spending their resources on developing a weather app, for example, they can't also be fixing bugs in the existing app. Like podcasts ending abruptly, which is a thing that they did fix, or expanding functionality of multiple alarms and recurring alarms, which are things that they did add after launch. It's part of the reason I'm a satisfied customer is because they continue to push out software updates. But they're a small company, and they've been working with a major technological constraint, and so it's been slow. With the new screen on the Model 3, that constraint is now gone. Light OS is based on Android. There are plenty of harmless, functional, privacy-respecting Android apps that exist today and can be easily downloaded without bowing down to Google. But I don't anticipate getting free rein to install any app I want from F-Droid on my Model 3, primarily because those apps, without any modifications, would clash stylistically with the all-important design language throughout the rest of Light OS. I'm sure there are other technical differences between Light OS and stock Android that would make it difficult to just port them over quickly. But then it begs the question, is it still necessary to run Light OS on the Model 3? On the Model 2, it makes sense. It requires something new in order to be usable. The Model 3 doesn't. So the $800 question, and yes, that is the MSRP for the Model 3, if you didn't know, is why use that instead of this? This is a Pixel 6a that I bought brand new on eBay for $150 back in January. Your mileage may vary with pricing, but there's a lot of wiggle room below the $800 mark to find a quality phone. And there is a way to avoid using the types of harmful apps that Light Phone discourages. You just don't install them. That's it. As a reminder, I'm approaching this video with the assumption that you have already made up your mind. You want to try out this going light lifestyle. I understand that there are people out there who legitimately are addicted to apps on their smartphones, and even if they did uninstall them, they'd be reinstalled by the end of the day. My suggestion to simply limit yourself to harmless apps, it requires a level of self-control that not everyone has, and I'm not trying to shame those people, but those people would probably not succeed with a light phone either, because the elephant in the room is, why do I own this? I switched from a smartphone to a light phone 2 because it did 95% of what I use my cell phone for: texting, calling, alarm clock, etc. But when I needed that other 5%, it was extremely inconvenient to not have it. For example, concerts and ball games, they often have QR code based tickets that can't be printed. It sucks to not have Uber when you really need it. Zelle is my only digital payment option for rent. You might need 2FA for work. Even restaurants and bars have stopped giving paper menus, and they're starting to require smartphones to look at the menus. All of these things might have individual workarounds, like a will call window at a ball game or something like that. But this one device takes care of all of them. Plus, it had a camera, which I needed while I was owning the light phone too. So even in my case, where I felt like I wasn't giving up a whole lot to switch away from my smartphone, I still couldn't do it cold turkey. I needed to keep a smartphone around. So if it's impossible for someone to own one of these without wasting hours on it, a light phone is not a magic solution to that problem. But anyway, for me, I haven't minded having a second phone around too much. It's usually predictable when I'm going to need it. And they feel like two very different devices. This is my telephone, and this is my ticket to the Phils game. I could not reasonably expect the MLB Ballpark app to work on this. I don't expect to feel the same way with a light phone 3 in my pocket. That's the thing. I think I'll feel like this is a smartphone that can do everything, and my light phone 3 is a smartphone that only allows me to do 5 or 10 curated things. And if I want a smartphone that only does curated things, then why not just curate them myself? You can see I'm running an alternate launcher called Simple Launcher, which looks very similar to Light OS. And you can see I haven't installed that many apps. So let's try to answer this honestly. Why would you want to buy a Light Phone 3 versus just reducing the number of apps on your current phone? There's the unusual shape of the Light Phone 3. There's the consistent design language across every app, which is nice to look at. There's the replaceable battery now. I'm genuinely excited about having a dedicated flashlight button, as lame as that sounds. I love a good tactile wheel. I don't think screen brightness is the most exciting use for it, but they have teased the ability to use it for other things and other apps. If we're optimistic, we can hope that by switching to a more standardized screen type in AMOLED, they'll be able to churn out new apps more quickly. So for example, take an open source weather app, make it black and white, cut out the fluff, and make it work somehow without needing to start from scratch. A reasonable person could look at the things I just listed and say, those are reasons why I want that phone instead of this one. Also, your monthly phone bill might actually be lower too with a smartphone or with a light phone. Verizon treats my Model 2 like a smartwatch, and it only charges me $15 a month on our family plan, which has saved me hundreds of dollars over the years versus underutilizing a smartphone for $40 a month. I don't know for certain that the Model 3 will work the same way. I hope it does. And again, your mileage may vary with your carrier. There's also privacy concerns on the operating system level. Even if you're not using Google Apps, you're using a Google OS that almost certainly farms and sells data about the apps you do use. Depending on the phone, you could jailbreak it, run custom version of Android without all the Google stuff, but that's outside of most people's comfort zones. But when LightOS adds new features, they do make a point of laying out all the steps they've taken to protect user data. So there's some validity to that as a reason to use a light phone. But I don't think it's a reason people buy a light phone. The marketing copy doesn't really push that or get that technical. Another use case that I haven't mentioned yet because it's kind of outside the scope of this video is buying this phone for your kid. Depending on their age, they might hate you for it, but if you're genuinely concerned about TikTok or games with slot machine mechanics or whatever else rotting their brain, the Model 3 could be a great middle ground between giving them access to the entire App Store and giving them no phone at all. The company actually had a great case study where a boarding school banned smartphones and gave all the students Model 2s. So if the end user is an unwilling participant in the phone selection, giving them a Model 2 with its slow texting and its lack of a camera, it may feel like a punishment, versus giving them a Model 3 will probably just feel like parental controls, like a whitelist of apps. Disclaimer, I have no idea what parental control settings are like on modern smartphones nowadays, but regardless, I think most parents would rather just have it baked into the phone rather than having to fiddle with that stuff. But anyway, back to reasons why somebody might buy this for themselves. There's a more cynical explanation. Owning a light phone is more of a fashion statement than owning a Pixel with fewer apps on it. If I'm carrying this around, you can't tell that I'm using it less frequently than an average Pixel user. And that's maybe something people care about. A light phone is a conversation starter. You can trust me on that. Even if you get tired of having that same conversation with every new person you meet, people are intrigued by it, and they often ask why you chose it. It invites this opportunity for you to talk about how enlightened you are on digital minimalism and mental health and all that, if you're into that. I can't help but see the Model 3 as a way to sell the light brand and the lifestyle to people who were scared off by the hardware of the Model 2. Those people could just uninstall apps on the phone they already have, or they could join a movement and get a branded phone to go along with this. And I know I sound very snobby saying all of this. I'll just remind you, like I pre-ordered a Light Phone 3. I'm going to be one of those people. I want the camera. I want the improved texting experience. But I can tell you, I would not have considered it even for a second at the $800 MSRP. Pre-order pricing is 50% off at $400, which is one of the most aggressive pre-order discounts I've ever seen. And I worry about their ability to sell it for full price afterwards. But if you are shopping for a new phone and you have an $800 budget and you have some self-control, there are alternatives out there for you to consider. First of all, just do a trial run on the phone that you currently have. Uninstall everything except the apps that are also offered on a light phone. Then consider that the light phone versions of those apps will be even more simplified and bare bones. And ask yourself, will you be okay with those apps and absolutely nothing else until they release a new app of their choosing? Would you be happier with a Fairphone 4 and a few $100s in your pocket, or a last-gen flagship like this? If you just want something different from the generic black rectangle, and that's why you're looking at light phones, then look into the phones from Unihertz. They have tiny phones. They've got phones with physical keyboards. They've got rugged phones. I don't think they're great about software updates, and I don't know much about the company, so I don't take this as an endorsement, but they make weird phones. In that same vein, there was a popular Indiegogo a couple months ago for something called the Minimal phone. I personally avoided it due to some Kickstarter-related red flags, but if you wait it out and they actually do end up shipping phones to satisfied customers, then maybe it's worth a look. There's other e-ink phones out there from more reputable companies like Hisense and Boox, I think it's pronounced, Boox, if you want to look into those. I know the Light Phone company never formally positioned itself as an e-ink phone manufacturer, but I do think that's a big reason why their customers bought the Model 2. I know it was for me. There were other companies making dumb phones out there, from old mainstays like Nokia to newcomers like Punkt. And so it's weird to see them position the Model 3 as a successor to the Model 2 when the Model 3 wouldn't have stood out as much in the crowd as their first product did. But as someone who's gotten used to Light OS and a $15 cell plan and would love to start sending and receiving photos again, I am personally looking forward to my $400 phone. And there's an affiliate link in the description of this video if this video somehow convinced you to buy the Model 3 along with me. And if anyone gives a damn, maybe I'll do a hands-on review when I actually have one.